The crystal chandelier sparkled above the crowded ballroom as dozens of wealthy guests mingled at the annual charity gala. Everyone was dressed in their finest clothes, sipping expensive wine and talking about their latest business deals or vacation plans. The host of this grand event was David Chen, a man who had built a technology empire worth $50 million over the past 15 years. David stood near the main entrance, greeting guests with a polite smile, but his mind seemed elsewhere tonight. Something felt different about this year's event. Maybe it was because he had been thinking more about his past lately, or maybe it was just the stress of running 3 different companies at once. His wife Jennifer was busy showing off her new diamond necklace to a group of ladies near the auction table, her voice carrying across the room as she laughed at something one of them said. The charity gala was Jennifer's idea from the beginning. She loved these kinds of events because they gave her a chance to network with other wealthy families and show off their success. Tonight was no different. She had spent weeks planning every detail, from the flower arrangements to the menu, making sure everything looked perfect for their high society friends. As David walked through the crowd, nodding at familiar faces and making small talk about business, he noticed the catering staff moving quietly between the guests. They were refilling wine glasses, clearing empty plates, and making sure everyone had what they needed. Most of the guests barely noticed them, treating them like they were invisible. But then David saw someone who made him stop in his tracks. An older woman with graying hair was carefully arranging fresh flowers on one of the side tables. She moved, with the same gentle grace he remembered from long ago, and when she turned slightly, he could see her profile clearly. His heart started beating faster as memories came flooding back. It was Rosa Martinez, the woman who had practically raised him after his parents died in a car accident when he was just 8 years old. David felt like he was 8 years old again, standing in the doorway of his childhood home, watching Rosa prepare his favorite breakfast before school. She had come to work for his family as a housekeeper and nanny, but she had become so much more than that. When his parents were gone, Rosa was the one who held him when he cried, helped him with his homework, taught him right from wrong, and made sure he never felt alone in the world. Rosa had worked for the Chen family for over 10 years, taking care of David like he was her own son. She had never married or had children of her own, so she poured all her love and attention into making sure David grew up to be a good man. She taught him to be kind to others, to work hard for what he wanted, and to never forget where he came from. But as David got older and busier with school, then college, then starting his first business, he had gradually lost touch with Rosa. Life got complicated and somehow the years just slipped away. He had often thought about finding her and reconnecting, but there was always another meeting, another deadline, another crisis that demanded his attention. Now here she was, working at his own charity event, and he could hardly believe it. David's hands were actually shaking as he walked toward her. She looked older, of course, and he could see that life hadn't been easy for her. Her clothes were simple and worn, and there were lines on her face that hadn't been there when he was young, but her eyes still had that same warmth and kindness that he remembered so well. When Rosa looked up and saw him approaching, her face lit up with surprise and joy. She dropped the flowers she was holding and covered her mouth with both hands, tears already forming in her eyes. "David, is it really you?" she whispered in her soft voice, the same voice that used to read him bedtime stories and sing lullabies when he had nightmares. "Rosa," David said, his own voice cracking with emotion, "I can't believe you're here." Without thinking, he opened his arms to hug her, but before he could take another step, Jennifer appeared beside him like a storm cloud. "David, what are you doing?" Jennifer hissed under her breath, grabbing his arm and pulling him back. "People are watching." Jennifer had been born into wealth and had never worked a day in her life. She came from a family that had old money and old-fashioned ideas about social classes. To her, there were clear lines between people like them and people who worked for them, and those lines should never be crossed. She looked at Rosa with barely hidden disgust, as if she couldn't understand why her husband would want to talk to one of the catering staff, let alone hug her. "This is Rosa," David explained, trying to keep his voice calm even though his heart was pounding. "She took care of me when I was young. She's like family to me." Jennifer's face grew cold and hard. She had heard David mention Rosa's name before, but she had always thought of her as just an employee from his past. The idea that David considered this working-class woman to be family was embarrassing and unacceptable to her. "I don't care who she used to be," Jennifer said in a low, dangerous voice. "She's working here tonight and you're making a scene. Everyone is staring at us." Rosa could feel the tension in the air, and she took a small step backward. She had worked for wealthy families her entire life, and she knew the signs of trouble. She could see that Jennifer was angry, and she didn't want to cause problems for David. "It's okay," Rosa said quietly, looking down at the floor. "I should get back to work anyway." But David wasn't going to let this moment slip away. He had found Rosa again after all these years, and he wasn't going to let his wife's embarrassment keep him from talking to the woman who had saved his life in so many ways. "No. Wait," David said, reaching out toward Rosa. "We need to talk. I want to know how you've been, what you've been doing. I've thought about you so many times over the years." That's when Jennifer completely lost her temper. What happened next would change everything, and David would never forget the look of hurt and disappointment in Rosa's eyes as his wife showed her true colors in front of everyone at the party. The reunion that should have been a moment of joy was about to become something much darker, and David would soon have to make a choice between the woman he married and the woman who had raised him to be the man he was today. Jennifer's face turned red with anger as she saw her husband reaching out to Rosa. In her mind, this was the worst possible thing that could happen at their elegant charity event. She had worked so hard to build their reputation in high society, and now David was about to ruin everything by treating a member of the catering staff like family. "David, stop this right now," Jennifer said through gritted teeth, but her voice was loud enough that several nearby guests turned to look. The conversations around them began to quiet down as people noticed something was happening. The wealthy guests, dressed in their expensive gowns and tailored suits, started whispering to each other and pointing in their direction. This was exactly what Jennifer had been afraid of. But David wasn't listening to his wife anymore. All he could see was Rosa, the woman who had been there for him during the darkest time of his life. He remembered how she used to make him hot chocolate when he couldn't sleep, how she helped him with his math homework at the kitchen table, and how she never missed a single one of his school plays or soccer games. "Rosa, I'm so sorry," David said, ignoring Jennifer completely. "I should have found you years ago. I should have stayed in touch." Rosa's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling through them. "You were just a boy when I last saw you," she said softly. "Look at you now. I always knew you would do great things." "This is ridiculous," Jennifer snapped, stepping between David and Rosa. "You're causing a scene and I won't stand for it." Some of the other guests had moved closer now, curious about what was happening. Jennifer could feel their eyes on her, and she knew she had to take control of the situation before it got any worse. "Excuse me," Jennifer said to Rosa in a voice that was loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing here, but it needs to stop right now." Rosa looked confused and hurt. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't understand." "Oh, I think you understand perfectly," Jennifer continued, her voice getting louder and more aggressive. "You probably saw my husband's name in the newspaper and figured out he was rich now, so you got yourself hired by the catering company just so you could show up here tonight and try to take advantage of his kindness." The entire room seemed to go quiet. Even the musicians stopped playing. Everyone was staring now, and David felt like the ground was disappearing beneath his feet. "Jennifer, what are you doing?" David whispered urgently. "That's not what this is." But Jennifer was on a roll now, fueled by years of insecurity and her desperate need to maintain their social status. She had grown up hearing her mother say that poor people were always trying to take advantage of wealthy families, and she truly believed that Rosa was just another person trying to get money from them. "Look at her," Jennifer said, pointing at Rosa like she was something dirty. "She probably hasn't had a real job in years, and now she shows up here pretending to care about you. It's pathetic." Rosa's face went pale, and she took another step, backward. She had dealt with cruel employers before, but this was worse because it was happening in front of so many people. She could feel everyone staring at her, judging her, and she just wanted to disappear. "Ma'am, I promise I'm not trying to cause any trouble," Rosa said quietly, her voice shaking. "I was just happy to see David again. I'll go back to work now." "No, you won't," Jennifer said firmly. "You're going to leave. Right now." David finally found his voice. "Jennifer, stop it. You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about," Jennifer shot back. "This woman is trying to embarrass us in front of our friends. She's probably hoping you'll feel sorry for her and write her a big check." The cruel words hit Rosa like physical blows. She had never asked David for anything, not even when her husband got sick and the medical bills started piling up. She had been too proud to reach out to the little boy she had raised even when she lost her house and had to move into a tiny apartment. "That's not true," Rosa said weakly, but her voice was so quiet that hardly anyone could hear her. "Security," Jennifer called out loudly, making sure everyone in the room could hear her. "We need someone removed from the premises immediately." Two large men in black suits appeared quickly. They had been hired to make sure the event went smoothly, and they were used to dealing with people who didn't belong at these kinds of parties. "This woman is bothering the guests," Jennifer announced to the security guards, speaking loud enough for half the room to hear. "She's pretending to know my husband so she can try to get money from us. I want her escorted out right now." David felt like he was watching a nightmare unfold in slow motion. The woman who had raised him, who had sacrificed so much to take care of him, was being humiliated in front of dozens of people by his own wife. "Wait," David said desperately. "This is all wrong. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Jennifer interrupted him. "This is what happens when people like her think they can take advantage of people like us. Well, it's not going to work." The security guards looked uncomfortable, but they had their orders. They moved toward Rosa, who was now crying quietly but trying to maintain her dignity. "Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to leave," one of the guards said gently. He seemed to realize that Rosa wasn't actually causing any trouble, but he had to follow Jennifer's instructions. Rosa nodded and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She looked at David one last time, and he could see all the hurt and disappointment in her face. She had hoped that the little boy she raised would stand up for her, but instead he was just standing there while his wife destroyed her in front of everyone. "It's okay," Rosa whispered to the security guards. "I'll go." As Rosa was escorted toward the exit, Jennifer turned to the crowd of guests who had been watching the whole scene. "I'm so sorry everyone had to witness that," she announced loudly. "Some people will do anything to try to get close to successful families, but we can't let people like that take advantage of our kindness." Several guests nodded in agreement, but others looked uncomfortable with what they had just witnessed. David's Aunt Patricia, who had known Rosa years ago, looked shocked and disgusted by Jennifer's behavior. David wanted to run after Rosa, to apologize and explain, but he felt frozen in place. The whole thing had happened so fast, and now Rosa was gone and everyone was staring at him. Jennifer smiled triumphantly and took his arm. "Now," she said sweetly, as if nothing had happened, "let's get back to our guests. We have a charity auction to run." But David knew that something had changed forever that night. The look in Rosa's eyes as she was escorted out would haunt him, and he was beginning to see his wife in a completely different light. That night, David couldn't sleep at all. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Jennifer slept peacefully beside him, as if nothing had happened. But David's mind was racing with images of Rosa's face when she was being escorted out of his house. The hurt in her eyes kept replaying over and over in his head. He got up quietly and went to his home office, closing the door behind him. The house felt different now, like it wasn't really his home anymore. Everything looked the same. The expensive furniture, the artwork on the walls, the fancy decorations that Jennifer had chosen. But somehow it all felt cold and empty. David sat at his desk and opened his laptop. He hadn't thought about Rosa in years, not really. His life had become so busy with work and business deals that he had pushed those childhood memories to the back of his mind. But now they were all coming back. and he felt terrible about how he had let their connection fade away. He remembered Rosa's last day working for his family. He was 18 then, about to leave for college. Rosa had packed his bags for him and made his favorite cookies for the trip. She had hugged him tight and told him she was proud of him, and that she knew his parents would be proud too. They had both cried a little, and Rosa had made him promise to write to her. But college was overwhelming, and then came graduate school, and then starting his first business. There were always excuses for why he couldn't visit or call. He had sent her a few letters in the beginning, but even those stopped after a while. Life just got in the way, and somehow 20 years had passed without any contact. Now David realized how selfish he had been. Rosa had given him the best years of her life, raising him like her own son, and he had just forgotten about her when it became inconvenient to stay in touch. He spent the next hour searching online, trying to find any information about Rosa Martinez. He found a few old addresses and phone numbers, but most of them seemed outdated. Finally, he decided he needed professional help. The next morning, David called a private investigator named Tom Wilson. Tom specialized in finding people, and he had helped David with some business matters in the past. David explained the situation, leaving out the embarrassing details about what Jennifer had done at the party. "I need to find someone who used to work for my family," David said. "Her name is Rosa Martinez, and I lost touch with her about 20 years ago. I just want to make sure she's doing okay." Tom was good at his job, and within 2 days he called David back with information that made David's heart sink. "I found her," Tom said over the phone, "but I have to tell you her situation isn't great." David listened in shock as Tom explained what he had discovered. Rosa was living in a small studio apartment in a rough part of town. She was working 3 different jobs just to pay her bills, cleaning offices at night, working at a laundromat during the day, and doing catering work on weekends. "Why is she working so much?" David asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. "Medical bills," Tom explained. "Her husband died of cancer about 5 years ago. The treatment costs wiped out their savings, and she's still paying off the debt. She lost their house and had to sell most of their belongings." David felt sick to his stomach. While he had been building his fortune and living in luxury, the woman who had raised him had been struggling just to survive, and she had been too proud to ever ask him for help. "There's more," Tom continued. "I talked to some of her neighbors and co-workers. Everyone says she's one of the kindest people they've ever met. She's always helping others, even though she doesn't have much herself. One neighbor told me Rosa has been taking care of an elderly woman in her building, bringing her groceries and medicine." That sounded exactly like the Rosa he remembered. She had always put other people's needs before her own. "Can you give me her address?" David asked. "Of course. But Mr. Chen, if you don't mind me asking, how did you lose touch with someone who was so important to you?" David didn't have a good answer for that question. The truth was, he had let success and wealth change him. He had gotten caught up in Jennifer's world of fancy parties and social status, and he had forgotten about the people who really mattered. After Tom gave him Rosa's address, David sat in his office for a long time, thinking about what to do next. He wanted to help Rosa, but he knew he had to be careful about how he approached her. After what Jennifer had done at the party, Rosa probably never wanted to see him again. That evening, David decided to drive to Rosa's neighborhood. He didn't plan to knock on her door. He just wanted to see where she was living and maybe figure out the best way to reach out to her. The area was completely different from his wealthy neighborhood. The buildings were old and needed repairs, and many of the streetlights were broken. David felt uncomfortable driving his expensive car through these streets, realizing how out of place he looked. He found Rosa's apartment building and parked across the street. It was a small, run-down building with peeling paint and broken steps. David couldn't believe that the woman who had given him such a comfortable childhood was now living in a place like this. As he sat in his car, he saw Rosa walking up the street carrying grocery bags. She moved slowly, like her back was hurting, and David could see how much older she looked than she had just a few days ago at the party. The stress and hard work had clearly taken a toll on her. David watched as Rosa stopped to help an elderly man who was struggling to carry something up the steps to the building. Even though she was carrying her own heavy bags and looked tired, she took the time to help him. That was the Rosa he remembered, always thinking of others first. After Rosa disappeared into the building, David sat in his car for another hour, trying to decide what to do. He knew he needed to make things right, but he also knew that it wouldn't be easy. Rosa had been hurt badly by what happened at the party, and she might not want anything to do with him anymore. But David also started thinking about Jennifer and their marriage. What he had seen at the party wasn't just a moment of stress or embarrassment. Jennifer had been truly cruel to Rosa, and she hadn't shown any regret afterward. In fact, she had seemed proud of what she had done. For the first time, David began to wonder if he really knew his wife at all. They had been married for 8 years, but suddenly he was seeing a side of her that he didn't like. How could she be so heartless to someone who had never done anything wrong? As David drove home that night, he made a decision. He was going to find a way to help Rosa, no matter what Jennifer thought about it. And he was going to have a serious conversation with his wife about her behavior. But first, he needed to figure out how to apologize to the woman who had raised him and ask for her forgiveness. That conversation was going to be one of the hardest things he had ever done. The next morning, David woke up with a heavy heart but a clear mind. He had made his decision during the long, sleepless night. He was going to confront Jennifer about what she had done to Rosa, and he was going to find a way to make things right. Jennifer was in the kitchen having her usual breakfast of yogurt and fresh fruit while scrolling through her phone. She looked perfectly content, as if the events at the charity gala had never happened. She was probably reading about their event in the society pages, David thought bitterly. "We need to talk," David said, sitting down across from her at their marble kitchen table. Jennifer looked up from her phone with mild annoyance. "About what? And why do you look so serious? The party was a huge success. Everyone's talking about how elegant it was." "The party was a disaster," David said firmly. "What you did to Rosa was completely wrong, and I want you to explain yourself." Jennifer's expression changed from annoyed to defensive. "Oh, not this again. David, I saved you from being embarrassed by that woman. You should be thanking me." "Thanking you?" David couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Jennifer, you humiliated someone who means the world to me. Rosa raised me after my parents died. She's the reason I became the person I am today." "That was 20 years ago," Jennifer said dismissively. "She was an employee, David, that's all she ever was. You're being way too sentimental about this." David felt his anger rising, but he tried to stay calm. She wasn't just an employee, she was family, and even if she wasn't, no human being deserves to be treated the way you treated her. Jennifer put down her phone and looked at David like he was being ridiculous. "Listen to yourself. You're a millionaire businessman and you're getting upset about hurting the feelings of a cleaning lady. Do you know how that makes us look?" "I don't care how it makes us look," David said, his voice getting louder. "I care about doing the right thing. Rosa never asked me for anything, never tried to take advantage of me. She was just happy to see me again." "Of course she was happy to see you," Jennifer said with a cruel laugh. "You're rich now. I'm sure she was planning to ask you for money before I stopped her." "You don't know anything about Rosa," David snapped. "If you did, you'd know that she would never ask for help even when she desperately needs it." "What do you mean, desperately needs it?" Jennifer asked, and David could see the suspicion in her eyes. David realized he had said too much, but there was no point in hiding it now. "I had her situation investigated. She's been working 3 jobs to pay off medical bills from her husband's cancer treatment. She lost her house and everything she owned, and she's living in a tiny apartment in a bad neighborhood." Jennifer's face went pale, but not with sympathy. She looked angry and scared. "You had her investigated?" "David, what are you planning to do?" "I'm planning to help her," David said simply. "She took care of me when I needed it most, and now it's my turn to take care of her." "Absolutely not," Jennifer said, standing up from the table. "I won't let you throw our money away on some sob story. That woman is not our responsibility." "She's my responsibility," David corrected her. "And it's my money too." Jennifer's eyes flashed with anger. Is it? Because last time I checked, we're married. What's yours is mine, remember? And I'm not going to let you waste our fortune on people who are beneath us. Beneath us? David repeated, shocked by his wife's words. Jennifer, how can you say that? Rosa is a good person who's had some bad luck. That doesn't make her beneath anyone. Wake up, David, Jennifer said harshly. There are two kinds of people in this world. People like us and people like her. If we start giving money to every person with a sad story, we'll end up just like them. David stared at his wife and realized that he was seeing her true personality for the first time in their 8 years of marriage. All this time he had thought Jennifer was just concerned about their social image, but now he understood that she genuinely believed she was better than other people because of her wealth. I can't believe you actually think that way, David said quietly. Think what way? Realistically? Jennifer crossed her arms and glared at him. David, I married you because you were successful and ambitious. I didn't sign up to support your charity cases from the past. You married me for my money, David said, and it wasn't a question. Jennifer's silence was answer enough. And what did I marry you for? David asked, more to himself than to her. Looking back, David realized that he had been attracted to Jennifer because she was beautiful and sophisticated, and because being with her made him feel like he had truly made it in the world. She came from an old wealthy family, and marrying her had been like joining an exclusive club, but he had never really gotten to know the person behind the perfect appearance. They had never talked about their values or their dreams for the future. Their relationship had been based on surface things, parties, vacations, showing off their success to others. I'm going to help Rosa, David said firmly. Whether you like it or not. Jennifer's face turned red with rage. If you give that woman 1 penny of our money, I will make your life miserable. I'll tell everyone we know that you're having some kind of breakdown, that you're being manipulated by a gold digger from your past. Go ahead, David said, surprising himself with how calm he felt. Tell them whatever you want. I'm serious, David. If you embarrass me like this, if you make me look like a fool in front of our friends, I will leave you. And when I do, I'll take half of everything you've worked for. Jennifer thought this threat would make David back down, but she had badly misjudged him. Instead of looking scared, David looked relieved. Is that a promise? He asked. Jennifer was confused by his reaction. What? If I help Rosa, you'll leave me? Yes, Jennifer said, thinking she was winning the argument. And I'll take half of your money with me. David nodded slowly. Actually, you won't take nearly as much as you think. Did you ever read that prenuptial agreement you signed before we got married? Jennifer's confident expression faltered. What prenuptial agreement? The one your lawyer told you not to worry about. The one that protects most of my assets if our marriage ends because of your behavior. The truth was, David had insisted on the prenup because his business lawyer had advised it, but Jennifer had signed it without really reading it carefully. Her lawyer had told her it was just a formality, that most wealthy couples had them. You're bluffing, Jennifer said, but she didn't sound sure anymore. Call your lawyer and ask him, David suggested. But while you're doing that, I'm going to go find Rosa and apologize for what happened at our party. David, wait, Jennifer said, and for the first time she sounded worried instead of angry. Let's talk about this. Maybe we can work something out. But David was already walking toward the door. There's nothing to work out, Jennifer. You showed me who you really are, and I don't like what I see. As David left the house, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Freedom. For too long, he had been living someone else's idea of success. Now it was time to start living according to his own values, the ones Rosa had taught him when he was young. He had some serious apologizing to do and some big decisions to make. But for the first time since the night of the party, David felt like he was heading in the right direction. David drove straight to Rosa's apartment building after leaving his house. His heart was pounding as he climbed the broken steps to her door. He had practiced what he wanted to say during the drive, but now that he was here, all those words seemed to disappear from his mind. He knocked gently on the door and waited. When Rosa opened it, she looked surprised and a little scared to see him standing there. "David, what are you doing here?" she asked softly, not opening the door all the way. "Rosa, please, I need to talk to you. I need to apologize for what happened." At the party, Rosa hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside to let him in. Her tiny studio apartment was clean and neat, but David could see how small and cramped it was. Everything she owned seemed to fit in this one room: a bed, a small table, a chair, and a tiny kitchen area. "I'm sorry about the mess," Rosa said, even though the place was perfectly tidy. "I wasn't expecting visitors." "Rosa, this place is fine," David said, though his heart broke seeing how different her life was from his.
"I'm the one who should be apologizing. What Jennifer did to you at the party was terrible, and I should have stopped her." Rosa sat down on the edge of her bed, the only place to sit besides the one chair. "It's okay, David. I understand. Your
"Wife was protecting you." "No, it's not okay," David said firmly. "And she wasn't protecting me. She was being cruel to someone I love. Rosa, you raised me. You're the most important person from my childhood, and I let her treat you like garbage." Tears started forming in Rosa's eyes. "I've thought about you so many times over the years. I wondered if you were happy, if you had found someone special, if you remembered the things I taught you." "I remember everything," David said, sitting down in the chair across from her. "I remember how you used to make me pancakes shaped like animals when I was sad. I remember how you helped me with my science projects. I remember how you held me when I had nightmares about my parents." They both sat quietly for a moment, remembering those days when David was just a lonely little boy who needed someone to care about him. "Rosa, I know about your husband," David said gently. "I know about the medical bills and losing your house. Why didn't you ever contact me? I would have helped you." Rosa shook her head. "You had your own life to live. I didn't want to be a burden to you." "A burden?" David couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Rosa, you gave me everything when I was young. You deserved so much better than what life gave you." "I had a good life," Rosa said with a small smile. "My husband and I were very happy together. The cancer was hard, but I don't regret spending everything we had to try to save him." David realized that even after losing everything, Rosa wasn't bitter or angry. She was the same kind, selfless person she had always been. "I want to help you now," David said. "I want to make sure you never have to worry about money again." "David, I can't take your money," Rosa said quickly. "That wouldn't be right." "Why not? You took care of me when I couldn't take care of myself. Now it's my turn." They talked for over an hour, and slowly David convinced Rosa to let him help her. But he didn't just want to give her money and walk away. He had a bigger plan in mind, something that would honor everything Rosa had done for him and help other people like her too. The next week, David called a meeting with the board of directors of his company. These were serious businessmen and women who helped him make important decisions about his technology empire. They were not expecting what David was about to tell them. "I want to start a new foundation," David announced to the surprised board members. "It will help people who take care of children, nannies, babysitters, caregivers, especially those who are struggling financially." The board members looked at each other with confusion. This was not the kind of business decision they usually discussed. "How much money are we talking about?" asked Helen, the chief financial officer. $10 million to start," David said calmly. Several people gasped. $10 million was a lot of money, even for a successful company like theirs. "David, that's very generous," said Robert, the oldest board member. "But why this particular cause? Why caregivers?" David had been thinking about how to answer this question. He could have made up some business reason or talked about tax benefits. Instead, he decided to tell them the truth. "Because 20 years ago, a woman named Rosa Martinez saved my life," David said. "When my parents died, she could have just done her job and gone home each day. Instead, she raised me like I was her own son. She taught me how to be a good person, how to work hard, and how to care about others." The room was completely quiet as David continued his story. Last week I found out that Rosa has been working 3 jobs just to pay off medical bills. She lost her house and everything she owned, and she's been too proud to ask for help. Meanwhile, I've been living in a mansion and throwing expensive parties. David could see that his story was affecting the board members. Some of them looked uncomfortable, probably thinking about people in their own lives who had helped them when they were young. I want to create the Rosa Martinez Foundation for Childcare Workers, David announced. It will provide financial help, health insurance, and retirement benefits for people who dedicate their lives to taking care of children. And Rosa will run this foundation? Helen asked. If she agrees to it, David said. I want to offer her a job as the director, with a good salary and full benefits. She knows better than anyone what caregivers need. The board voted unanimously to support David's idea. They were impressed by his story and his commitment to helping others. But David wasn't finished with his surprises. The following week, he held a press conference at his company headquarters. Local news stations came to cover what they thought would be a routine business announcement. Instead, they got a story that would touch the hearts of thousands of people. David stood in front of the cameras and told Rosa's story. He talked about how she had raised him after his parents died, how she had taught him the values that made his success possible, and how she was now struggling despite her lifetime of service to others. Rosa Martinez is the reason I am who I am today, David said to the reporters. She deserves to be honored, not forgotten, and there are thousands of caregivers like her who sacrifice everything to take care of children, only to be ignored when they need help themselves. Then David made his biggest announcement yet. In addition to the foundation, I am giving Rosa the deed to a beautiful house in the neighborhood where she used to live. I am also setting up a trust fund that will ensure she never has to worry about money again. The story spread quickly on social media and news websites. People loved hearing about someone who remembered where he came from and wanted to help the person who had helped him. Rosa was overwhelmed by David's generosity. She cried when he handed her the keys to her new house, and she cried again when she saw her first paycheck as director of the foundation. You didn't have to do all this, she told David as they stood in the kitchen of her new home. Yes, I did, David replied. I owed you a debt that I could never fully repay. But this is a start. Jennifer, meanwhile, had quietly left town after the divorce was finalized. The prenuptial agreement meant she received much less money than she had expected, and her friends in high society were not impressed by her treatment of Rosa. She found herself alone and embarrassed, facing the consequences of her cruel behavior. 6 months later, the Rosa Martinez Foundation had already helped over 100 caregivers across the country. Rosa loved her new job and threw herself into the work with the same dedication she had once given to raising David. David visited her every Sunday for dinner, just like when he was a child. They would sit at her kitchen table and talk about the foundation, about the people they were helping, and sometimes about the old days when he was just a scared little boy who needed someone to love him. You know, Rosa said one evening as they finished their meal, I always knew you would do something special with your life. But this is better than anything I could have imagined. David smiled and reached across the table to squeeze her hand. I learned from the best teacher, he said. And for the first time in years, David felt truly successful, not because of his money or his business, but because he was living according to the values Rosa had taught him long ago.